Hello everybody, this is Connor, BoatsDon'tSink, here with another Shadowverse Evolve video. This time we're going to be looking at the tier list and meta overview for BP11, Bullet of Fate. This is the newest released set as of last Friday, and we're going to start seeing its cards in play very soon, with the BCS in Rosemont being this weekend. It'll be the first event where BP11 is legal. And yeah, I'm pretty excited about it. I think BP11, this set starts the third year of the game, and I think from here on out is where we sort of see a pretty big change in the game, just in terms of the breadth of like viable decks and how many cards are going to interact with previously like existing cards. It's not just, oh yeah, here's your new set, here's your new archetype. Despite the fact that this set in particular is very archetype heavy, the game is to the point now where so many archetypes are fleshed out that a set like this adding one, maybe two new cards to an old existing archetype can bring that archetype back into a point of being strong. And we see that with a couple decks in this set, that like now every set may be supporting, 5 or 6 different decks at once, just with a few cards a piece here and there, and it's going to keep the meta very wide and very interesting. Even if there's like a best deck or best 2 decks or whatever, the spread of like viable decks is going to be very large for the foreseeable future. So that has me pretty excited. We've even started seeing this now with the recent Grand Showdown last weekend in Phoenix. The top 32, despite the fact that over 30% of it was Kagero, it still had 15 unique archetypes in top 32, which is pretty crazy. It's a lot going on, and there's some arguments like for and against the competitive merit of formats like that. It can make it seem like it's too hard to prepare for everything, but I think the way that Shadowverse is designed, it's pretty manageable for now. So yeah, let's look at the contents of BP11. The main thing that we're going to have here is the new trait, Wasteland. We're going to see this in every class. Every class gets at least 1 legendary with the trait and a spread of other lower rarity cards supporting it. Some of these are very much build-arounds, whereas others are just sort of supporting cards in a more generic sense. But every class here is going to get Wasteland. So this is similar to when we saw like Fable in set 3. Kind of like Natura and Machina in set 7. Where we're just getting a single archetype spread across everything. One of the main things that is shared between all of the Wasteland decks is the ability to create amulet tokens that are mount trait tokens. These are all 1 cost with a similar effect to bury them in order to buff followers on board. Either giving +1/+1, +1 in rush, or +1 attack and rush, or +1 defense and ward. These primarily just buff Wasteland followers, but it is worth noting that the rush and ward can go to any trait follower, giving them some generic usability there. The next new thing that we'll see in this set is the keyword Maneuver. Maneuver only appears on 2 cards, but they are 2 very meta-defining cards. They're both amulet tokens, but the first thing you'll notice about them is that they have attack and defense stats. So Maneuver, if you're familiar with Magic the Gathering, this is essentially crewing vehicles. You can pay whatever cost. The costs here are all sort of varied a little bit, but you can pay the cost to maneuver this card. For the rest of the turn, it becomes a follower with the printed stats. Then at the end of the turn, it will return to being just an amulet. You'll notice that the car has Storm, so it can attack the first turn you generate it and maneuver it. The train just has Rush, so it can attack followers the first turn you generate it. However, since on any following turn, it will have started the turn under your control, you will be able to attack a leader even though it was not a follower. So these do function, in essence, exactly like vehicles in Magic the Gathering, which is cool. It definitely provides another sort of angle for some of these decks to play with. Outside of that, we just see some various support for new and existing deck archetypes. Forest is going to get support for fairies and puppets. Sword gets some support for the thief archetype. Rune is going to get both Earthright and Spellchain support. Dragon gets a new sort of archetype introduced that is a 7-cost based archetype. And I believe it also gets some Draconic Duelist cards. Abyss is mostly generic Necrocharge support, though it does get a Sanguine card, at least one Sanguine card, at least one, I think, Vampire card, maybe? I know we're going to get some soon. And cards like Skeleton Dreamer, which, while being Wasteland cards, do support Ektar quite nicely. Haven is Amulet support, of course. I think that's the main thing we're going to see here outside of the Wasteland archetype. Though, and also Storm Haven support, which actually ties in quite nicely to what the Wasteland deck wants to do. So, lots of cool support for older stuff. Now let's take a look at some of the new and updated decks that you're going to want to focus on from this set. Obviously, I'm not going to cover everything. There's a ton of decks that you can just like add 1 or 2 new cards to, and they get some new life breathed into them. But these are sort of the main ones that are worth focusing on from the set, I think, and that are definitely worth taking a look at as like relevant archetypes you should keep your eyes out for. Starting with Forestcraft, we have the Wasteland Forest deck. So this is going to be focused around the new Loxus Homestead Pioneer Legendary. Loxus has a really cool effect that interacts with amulets, which is primarily, of course, these new mounts, the Dutiful Steed, the Bullet Bike, and the Arcane Personnel Carrier. Whenever you play an amulet, you recover a play point. So the forest cards are going to generate these amulet tokens in your EX area and allow you to, on your Loxus turn, play a bunch of them for essentially 0, building up your combo count, something that Forest wants to do. And then he can engage them to draw a card, he can evolve, and then he can banish all the 3 amulets that you played for various effects. And once per turn, when you one of these mounts leaves your field, so by his banish effect, you get 1 of each and heal 2. So he refunds them for the next copy of himself to do all over again. This is basically just free, easy build combo count to allow you to utilize cards like Sukuna, or, well, Sukuna can't evolve in the same turn as Loxus, so probably not Sukuna, but the new Shamu and Shama, which is a 1-cost storm that doesn't need to evolve, and various other combo cards that interact quite nicely with him. Of course, this deck will also play the rest of the new Wasteland cards. Forest gets some pretty cool ones. Of course, as I said, you're going to be focusing on putting the amulet tokens in your EX area, and a lot of the card's effects will care about either when a mount is put into your EX area, or how many of these mounts you have in your EX area, and field, in order to get extra effects. And they'll help you be either removal, or damage straight to your opponent's leader, or just, you know, lots of effects to help rebuild or initially build your mount count. Moving on into Swordcraft, we have, of course, the Wasteland Sword deck. This, I think, is probably the most highly anticipated deck from the set. Pretty widely regarded as the strongest deck out of the set. It is a sort of continuation of Sword's trend of being a very strong aggro deck. The cool thing that you're going to get here, of course, is Val, Trusty Getaway Car. It is generated by the Bunny and Baron Evo, which is just a 3/3 vanilla Evo into 4/4. On Evolve, you can either summon Val or search for Desperado's Shot, which is a removal spell that gets stronger if you have both Bunny and Baron and Val. So your second copy can get that after the first one creates Val. The car itself is a pretty strong just aggro tool. It allows your Bunny and Baron to maneuver it on the turn you generate it. attack for 3, and draw a card, since you'll have another Wasteland follower on your field, being Bunny and Baron, turning it into a card advantage engine that can essentially attack every turn while having protection from your opponent, because it'll be an amulet on the opponent's turn. And amulet removal is not super widespread right now, so very powerful card that if you can generate it like on turn 3 going second, it draws you, 4 or 5 extra cards throughout the game, which is really strong. The other legendary that Sword gets is also Wasteland trait, Natnot the Cursed Queen. Fanfare, you can search your deck for any 1-cost Sword card, allowing you to get either her own removal spell or her Henchman, which is a goblin stat line that draws you more cards. So just continues to sort of build these very cheap free aggro boards. Notably, Natnot plus her Henchman, which you can get for free, are able to together crew Val, or maneuver Val, rather, allowing you to attack for even more storm damage on the turn you play Natnot. She also has a pseudo removal effect using the new boxed keyword, which essentially just takes all the text off your opponent's card and doesn't let it untap. So really cool, giving the deck sort of a like mid-rangey vibe to it while still keeping up all the like storm, card draw, stuff like that. And of course, the deck will also play the other various Wasteland cards in Sword, which have a focus on actually being able to deal damage directly to your opponent's leader, while also generating mounts, allowing you to keep up pressure both through attacking and through effect damage. So really strong, really fast, lots of card advantage, kind of just everything you want in an aggro deck like this. The next Sword deck worth looking at is Spartacus Sword. So this is, of course, the deck that I played at the BSF in Duluth to a top 8 finish. It does get a little bit more support here, and continues to be pretty well positioned into the meta, I think. The big card that we get is, of course, Natnot. Tyrant's Order gives us a way to be like tall removal, which we previously were playing Nagi for. Natnot can box something in the search for Tyrant's Order. Tyrant's Order can destroy the boxed follower. So for 5 play points, we get to blow something up. And then the Tyrant's Order can also search for a Wasteland follower, which can get us another Natnot, which allows us to thin our deck by an additional card, keeping with that 1 play point to 1 card removed from deck. The only issue here is that Tyrant's Order does have a significant lack of good targets in the deck. It's pretty much just Natnot unless you want to play the Henchman, which gets you into some sort of weird situations where you draw the Henchman with no Natnot. But it is definitely worth considering Natnot as a sort of tall removal option to keep big threats off of you. Moving into Runecraft, there's actually not really a Wasteland archetype for Rune. There is, but none of the cards are really on their own good enough to justify playing Wasteland as Wasteland. Rather, a few of the cards here just want to be splashed into other decks. And the main really cool deck here, using the Wasteland Legendary, is the Vincent deck. So Vincent is a 5/5. I believe he's a 5-drop 4/4 that evolves into a 5/5. Let's see, we can look at his actual form here. Yeah, 5-drop 4/4. Fanfare, you search your deck for any Wasteland card, bury it, shuffle. So he just helps fill your cemetery. He evolves for 1. You can only activate it if he's gained attack or defense this turn, which you can of course do with either the steeds or the bikes or the personnel carriers. And on evolve is the main text we're looking for here. He cares about how many different costs are in your cemetery. If there's at least 3 costs, you gain 3 life. If there's at least 6, you draw a card. If there's at least 9, you deal 9 damage to each enemy follower. And if there's at least 12, you deal 12 to your opponent's leader. 12 to your opponent's leader is insane. It can very much just kill your opponent off of 1 or 2 Vincent Evos. And that's kind of just all the deck is going for. You're a control deck that has some burn damage and kills your opponent by evolving Vincent. To accomplish the 12 different costs in Cemetery, which of course is very difficult in a game that only goes up to cost 10 in terms of play points, you have to play some like 0 cost cards and of course some like 12 and 15 cost cards. One of the ways the deck tries to fuel this is by playing the set 4 legendary Zodiac Demon, to discard followers to deal damage equal to their cost to an enemy follower and half their cost to the enemy leader. Meaning Kuon can be like a 15 damage removal that deals 8 to your opponent. Prophetess of Creation can also be a really big burn effect off of this, and on her own also allows you to draw and discard cards, filling your cemetery quicker. The deck also plays cards like Dimension Shift as a 12 cost. It plays Mizuki as... Mizuki? I think Mizuki sounds right. The 7-drop from Idolmaster that can like evolve to free cast stuff from your EX area. Lots of stuff like that. The cards that don't generally see play otherwise, which makes this deck really cool. And it's really just trying to get to those 12 costs as fast as possible. Really, really interesting deck. It can be built in a way where it has like a couple different win conditions. But Vincent is the primary one that it's going for. Next up, we have Earthright Rune. This deck doesn't get a whole lot, but it gets some important cards. The things that we get here are Artistic Arcanist is a new follower for the deck, a 3-cost 1/4. It has Rush, Bane, and Drain, but more importantly, you can pay 1 Earthright to give another follower on your field Rush or Bane or Drain. Recently, of course, the deck lost access to 3 copies of Gingerbread House. You can now only play 1, which means the deck can now only heal 3 instead of healing 9. Artistic Arcanist is here to make up for that. We can give Riley Drain, allowing her to swing for 6 and heal us 6 every time. This is insanely powerful when combined with things like Caradwin's Reanimation spell to bring back Riley for very cheap, draw a bunch of cards, and then give her Drain to just heal us a bunch as well. So she's removal, card draw, and heal. Obviously, it's hard to give her Drain on the turns that you pay 6 for her to give her Storm, since you'll need Arcanist already on board most likely, but very easy to give Drain to the reanimated copies. In addition, the Evo, which it is a 3+2, but it's like kind of unconditional bounce removal, which just gives you a little more disruption, a little more way to hold over into the late game, which the deck really enjoys. And the deck also got a new spell, Terra Nova. This spell literally just, it gives you a sediment and then +2 is a stack, so it's 3 stacks for 2 play points at quick timing. This is very good in conjunction with quick removal spells, so if the deck is playing Surefire Bullet or Fire Chain or anything like that, it allows you to hold up removal, and then if you don't have to use the removal, you can use Terra Nova instead to generate 3 stacks. Having the extra stacks from Terra Nova, even if you play it during your own turn, is pretty important moving forward. Just because we lose 2 1-cost amulets in the 2 Gingerbread House, but we also are going to be spending more stacks on cards like Magical Augmentation, Artistic Arcanist, and things like that we weren't previously. Next, of course, is the Dimension Shift Rune deck. It would not be a new set release without giving new cards to D-Shift. We get, again, 2 cards here for D-Shift. Really just 1 and an option. Crystal Fencer is the main good thing that we're going to get here. This is a 3-cost 3/3 Fanfare, draw a card, discard a card. Obviously, something that is very good for the deck. Helps you fill your cemetery with spells, lets you get higher chest count, lets you discard Trail of Light, whatever you really want, while also digging you to your win conditions. He evolves for 1 into a 4/4. On evolve, you may put a Runecraft spell from your hand into your EX area. It costs 3 less to play this turn. This allows you to play a 3-cost spell in the same turn that you play Crystal Fencer, or a 2-cost or whatever, but it essentially means that Crystal Fencer can potentially be free going second or 1 play point going first, while still letting you fill your cemetery and play spells either for removal or card draw. So lets you play things like Checkmate for free, Check for free, Skewer for free, or just draw spells or Truth's Adjudication, whatever you need, really. But most importantly, maybe not most importantly, but a rather important function of this card is to be an additional body to attack with on your Dimension Shift turn. The decks can likely cut Flame Destroyer at this point if they hadn't already, because Crystal Fencer, despite being a 3-drop, which you normally would not want for your Dimension Shift turn, because he can reduce the cost of a Runecraft spell by 3, you can play him, evolve, and put Dimension Shift in your EX area. And now Dimension Shift only costs 4 after you banish 10. So it allows you to get an extra 4/4 that'll swing on your extra turn without the downside of it costing play points. The other cool card we get is Rapid Fire. This is essentially just the objective best Angelic Snipe clone for Rune now, outside of like maybe Hades Hypnotist. This is a 1-cost quick timing, deal 2. If you have at least 3 rapid fires already in your cemetery, you deal 3 instead, so that's a bonus there. And if there's at least 5, so if this is the 6th copy you're playing, you deal 4 to your opponent. Because these spell chain decks aren't actually playing all of their spells, if you actually run 6, you can like draw discard enough of them to get 5 into your cemetery. And of course, notably, you can put up to 6 of this card in your deck. These decks have been running as many as like 5 or 6 snipe clone effects already, which is why I bring this card up. However, 3 of those tend to be chess trait, and that is quite important, so Rapid Fire can't particularly replace the chess ones. But it is just worth keeping note of this card for the future. Anytime that you want to run a lot of snipes in a deck where you're not in need of chess trait, this card can be quite good. Next, we move on to Dragoncraft. Dragoncraft, as with the other classes, gets a Wasteland archetype. This one is quite interesting for Dragon. So it's actually a low-to-the-ground aggro deck. It kind of feels a lot like PDK decks did and wanted to. And this is, I would say, potentially a deck that you could play PDK in. If you were a fan of PDK and really wanted to try to do that. So Reggie, Peerless Artisan, is your boss unit here. She's a 3-cost 2/2 that has Storm at Overflow, so she scales well into the late game. Fanfare, you just reanimate a cost 2 or lower Wasteland follower from your cemetery, which is quite good. It means that if you play something strong on turn 2 and it dies, you can get it back on turn 3 immediately. Or you can just get back extra bodies for like Storm and stuff like that in your later turns. And then on Evo, for 1, you get to buff each other Wasteland follower on your field by 1 attack, which, if you're reanimating Storm bodies, can allow you to buff them even further. The rest of the Wasteland Dragoncraft cards are, of course, quite low cost, sort of in theme with this whole like summoning cost 2 or lowers. And while none of them have Storm themselves, they do have effects to either find you other Wasteland cards or generate the mounts. And Balefire Wrenchsmith can act as removal. Whenever another Wasteland card is put onto your field, you deal 1 to an enemy follower. That includes the mount tokens, so if you played a Balefire Wrenchsmith, made a steed, you get to shoot something for 1, and then if you play a second copy, he will make a mount. The first copy will see both enter, so it will deal 1 twice, and the second copy will see the mount enter and deal 1. So it's a good way to get a lot of 1s there. Feels very PDK-esque, and of course, if you had PDK, she would see each of them enter as well. The place that you're getting your Storm from is the neutral 1-drop Revalian Bandit, which gains Storm whenever its attack or defense increase. That can be achieved either through the mounts that you're generating or through Reggie's on Evolve to give +1 attack to each of your other Wasteland followers. Ramp Dragon is also a deck that gets some new tools here. The main thing that they're going to get is Resplendent Phoenix, Fenny. She is a 3-cost 3/3 ward. Last words, you give your leader +2 defense in case you need to play her early for some stability. However, the main star of the show here is her Fanfare effect. If Overflow is active, you pay 2, shuffle your deck, and then put the top card of your deck into your EX area. That card costs 0 to play this turn. You're essentially just spinning the wheel and gambling on hitting one of your big giant cards off the top, since you get to do it for 0. And since you're at Overflow, you'll have a few extra play points to work with anyway for like evolving that follower or whatever you need to do. Some cool cards you can see here are things like Sylvia, Ernst, or even Jabberwock, since Resplendent Phoenix is a body that Jabberwock can sack to then go get you either like Ernst or Genesis Dragon or whatever else. So really cool way to just sort of cheat big things into play. though of course it does have the chance that you just like hit a blazing breath off the top and feel like, or like a dragon oracle and feel like an idiot. But that's what we play dragon for, right? So yeah, cool ramp card. It does see play in some decks that sort of are built to abuse its effect, using things like Python to like banish 10 to 20 cards from your deck and take out all of your misses. Things like that to just sort of start swinging into very favorable scenarios that let you cheat more play points of guys into play than you should. In a similar vein, we have the 7-cost dragon deck. While this is not actually particularly a full deck right now, it is an archetype that starts to show up here and will be developed further in the future. It is essentially a variant of Ramp Dragon, where your cards care about things that cost specifically 7 or more. So you can see, let's go to the next slide here. Dragon Devouring Dread is the gold that we get in this set. Fanfare: for each Dragoncraft card that costs 7 or more in your cemetery, you get to banish an enemy follower on the field, which can, you know, by the time you're hard playing this guy or cheating him into play or whatever, you could be just banishing your opponent's entire field on Fanfare, which is quite powerful. You see Azure Flame Dragon Ute lets you deal 6 to an enemy follower on Fanfare. Pumpkin Dragon, Fanfare, heal 5, draw 2. So these are all very powerful Fanfare effects, but they're on very expensive bodies. To make up for that, these all have activated abilities that allow you to pay 1, 2, or 3 play points, discard them and another Dragoncraft card that costs 7 or more, in order to do a smaller version of their Fanfare effect, or in Dragon Devouring Dread's case, allow you to ramp. This makes them quite good as, like, cards that you can draw early and feel okay with, but also cards that, if you draw them late, still have text. Modal cards are one of Dragon's, like, best friends, since they are trying to ramp to the end game so late, and they want to play a lot of big, like, top-heavy bombs. Modal effects are what sort of saved Control Abyss in the form of Yuzuki. So while these 4 plus 1, I think there's one extra like removal spell that all fit this 7-cost theme right now. These cards would see play in things like the Fenny Ramp deck, and maybe some other decks, but they aren't quite a fully fleshed out archetype yet. By the time we get to set 16 in March, we will see this fully fleshed out as potentially one of the best decks in the format at that point, but that's later down the road. Moving into Abysscraft, we have one of my personal favorite decks from the set, the Wasteland Abyss deck, focusing on Ice Shillendrig, Gilded Autocrat. So Icy is a really cool 5-drop. He is the other maneuver amulet guy alongside Bunny and Baron. He summons the Magitrain to your field, which allows you to engage any number of followers with a total cost of 5 or more. This allows you to sort of play into the strengths of a lot of Abyss's really good 5-drop and higher cards. He also has another one of the best snipe clones that we've gotten thus far. It gives -2/-2 instead of dealing 2 damage, meaning even if it doesn't kill something, it can be used to cushion a hit from your opponent. The Wasteland archetype for Abyss also has some really good Necro Charge enablers and reanimation effects in the form of Ilgano, Horror Astray, who every time she dies goes back to your EX area and mills the top card of your deck, allowing you to build Necro Charge repeatedly. It's especially good with this, like, Soul Conversion. But once you hit Necro Charge 10, you can choose to reanimate something on Fanfare and banish her. One of your best targets for this is Wretch, who's also another good Necro Charge enabler. Last words, he makes a bike and then buries the top 2 of your deck. He can evolve for 1 into a 4/5 or a 4/3 Storm, but only if he entered from Cemetery, which Ilgano is your cheapest way to do. And then on evolve, he deals 5, which allows him to sort of clear wards and go in for 4 damage, all for like 2 play points. The rest of the Abyss Wasteland deck really gives you a few options in the direction you take it. You can either choose to focus heavily on more of the Wasteland cards, like Great Pick Corpse, Goldmine Necromancer, and Skeleton Dreamer, which are more of sort of an aggressive reanimation strategy, where you're using things like Wretch and Skeleton Dreamer to storm your opponent repeatedly. These kind of decks can even like lean into Ektar as their top end, since Ektar reanimating Skeleton Dreamer will give it +1/+1, immediately triggering its effect to gain Storm. Meaning you can now get 6 storm damage off of an Ektar without needing to evolve anything. These also get even stronger with like the bullet bikes that you might have sitting around. Those can pump it up to a potential 8 storm damage that you're getting off of Ektar. Or you can lean heavier into the train taking 5 costs to maneuver. And just lean into like all the very powerful 5 cost and higher sort of control cards that Abyss has access to. So things like Kawi, Yuzuki, or Zalganea. And just sort of play for the longer game where you stall your opponent out and use the train to accrue enough value to eventually win. Since the train's uninteractable, it essentially gives you a 4 attack storm body every turn that you can play something that costs 5 or more. Moving into the final class here, we have Haven. Haven's big thing that they're getting is the Wasteland Haven archetype. And these cards do kind of support a few of the other archetypes at the same time, namely the Amulet deck and the Storm deck. And they kind of can all, if you wanted, merge into one sort of Wasteland-centric shell here. So the main Wasteland legendary here is Selena, Sugar Kiss Assassin. She's a 4-drop 2/2 Storm. Strike, recover 2 play points. So while she does cost 4, you can also play a 2-drop in the same turn as her, allowing you to be quite aggressive with like storm bodies and chunk your opponent with multiple attacks in a turn. Fanfare, you get 4 cards off the top of your deck, which allows you to get a Wasteland card and a follower that costs 2 or less into your EX area. The rest go to the bottom of your deck. Being able to get a Wasteland is quite good. Being able to get any cost 2 or less means you can also play cards like Amethyst Lion, which are storm bodies that benefit from like just interacting with Selena. She also has a spell that works well with her where you can get this off of the Wasteland target part of her effect. Only costs 1 if you have Selena in play, deals 4 to an enemy follower, and then deals 1 to your opponent if you have a Wasteland card in your EX area, which can be other cards you got off Selena, or it can be the various mount amulets that you might have put there. The rest of the Wasteland trait cards that you'd be playing in this deck are also pretty like aggressive leaning. Shady Priest gives you a Steed in EX area, and is a 2/1 for 1. However, he also has a removal effect for 3 play points whenever a mount you control leaves the field. You can banish an enemy follower. This is quite powerful if you have ways to put mounts directly into play, using some of the neutral cards instead of needing to get them in your EX area. Revolver Eagle is a 2/1 Storm for 2. That can be a 6/5 Storm for 8 if you need. And also generates a Bullet Bike, which can make it a 3/1 as well for quite cheap. And then Revalian Bandit, of course, is the neutral that I mentioned earlier. Gains Storm whenever its attack or defense increase, making it another good, cheap target to get that can benefit from all like the bikes and steeds. The rest of the deck, of course, as I mentioned, you can lean into this sort of Storm archetype. However, because the steeds and bikes and all are amulets, this gives you actually a kind of strange direction you can take the top end of the deck, where you have like Storm and Aggression early, but have ways to stabilize and play more control games at the top end, with the other Wasteland legendary, Anvelt, who has Ward, and Fanfare, you deal 3 damage to up to 2 enemy followers, and then if you have a Wasteland card in EX area, you deal 2 to each enemy leader. So double removal plus 2 to the face. On Evo, he does the same thing. So this is essentially 12 damage split between 4 targets, however you want, as well as 4 damage to your opponent's leader on a 5/6 ward. So quite a good defensive card there. And if you're setting up a bunch of like bikes and steeds, it's very difficult to get 4 because of the way they work, but you can quite easily get 3 amulets into play this way. which still allows an Alexiel to heal 6 and deal 6 to your opponent, while also being a ward. So pretty solid, like defensive option top end there, that can lean into like burn damage to finish your opponent off after you've chipped them away with a bunch of storm cards. Alright, taking a look at what I think the tier list here is going to look like. There's actually not as many decks on here, I think, as some of the previous tier lists. That being said, I do think there are a lot of potentially viable decks this format. But if you were going to a tournament, like a regional, like Rosemont this weekend, the things I would say about this tier list are the decks in tier 1 are the decks that I would not be surprised if they won the whole event. And I very much would expect to see them making up the majority of the top cut. The decks in tier 2, I would not be surprised if they top cut. I don't quite expect them to win, but I do expect them to perform quite well. The tier 3 decks, I think, are viable. I expect to see them performing to some amount of success. I do not necessarily expect to see a lot of them in top cut, but 1 or 2 could very easily sneak in. Anything that I do not have on this tier list, I either do not think is quite good enough as a deck in this format, or I'm just not really experienced enough to rank it in the context of this format. So, for example, because I know people are going to mention them, right? Like things like Academic Rune, or 2-cost Abyss, or Draconic Duelist, or Fairies, I don't have on here. Those decks did not particularly gain much from this set, I don't think. And as a result, I think they've sort of only shifted down in the meta from where they were previously. And I don't expect them to like top these events, but they could. They certainly could. But yeah, without further ado, tier 3, these are just in class order, so no specific order within tiers. Wasteland Forest. Natura Sword, I think, is definitely still hanging on as a powerful deck. Spartacus gives the deck sort of everything it needs at the top end. If it can just draw a bunch of cards, you don't actually have to get all the Mistalina Storm damage through. If you can just play a good removal-based game, sort of replacing the Meisha top end that it previously had. So, still quite a powerful deck there. Wasteland Dragon. Wasteland Dragon and Forest, and Haven, I think are all kind of in the same boat, where their key cards do powerful things, but they don't have enough Wasteland cards to build out the archetype in its entirety yet. I think in the future they could, but right now they are strong shells that have to fill in a lot of gaps with cards that don't necessarily synergize as well as they would like. And also Amulet Haven. I think this deck is still powerful, has access to a lot of strong amulets that are good sort of regardless, and benefits a little bit from the inclusion of these Wasteland cards as well. In tier 2, I have Spartacus. I put this deck in tier 3, I believe, last set, and that was probably a mistake. Even when I put it in tier 3, I was intending to take it to Duluth, but I had not yet started actually testing it, and the deck performed much better than I expected in testing. And I do think this is legitimately one of the more powerful decks in the format. I would not quite put it in tier 1, because I think the more people figure out how this deck works, and the better aggro decks get, which this set has a lot of aggro decks, the harder it is for Spartacus to stabilize into a position where it can manage to draw its whole deck. But because of how uninteractive it is and how much it can focus on just surviving instead of needing to focus on killing the opponent, it is for sure a powerful deck. My next deck in tier 2 is D-Shift. This might just be wrong. This might be a tier 1 deck. This is certainly the one that's most on the fence for me. But I think the presence of some like strong aggro decks, especially in the lower tier Wasteland decks, could serve to just be a little too many matchups for D-Shift to be able to survive the early game every single time. Obviously, these decks can play a lot of like snipes, a lot of things like that, but I think if you're a D-Shift player and you run into like 4 aggro matchups in a row, you're kind of destined to lose like 1 or 2 of them eventually. And I think there's some good aggro decks in this format. So D-Shift is certainly a good deck, and it might be tier 1. I might be underrating it just a little bit here. Vampires is my other deck in tier 2. This deck, I was a bit surprised it won the Grand Showdown. I think it has some certainly poor matchups, but its opening turns can be quite powerful and very difficult to come back from, since it can turn them into just very hard-hitting storm turns in the later parts of the game, and also has a lot of reasonable heal, burn, and removal sort of tied to all of its cards. So very solid deck. I think it's going to stumble a little too much to win, but again, I do think D-Shift, Spartacus, and Vampires are all decks that I could see topping, and I would not be surprised. Moving into Tier 1, these are the decks I certainly expect to see in the top cut, and expect to see one of these decks winning the event in some form or another. We have Wasteland Sword. Deck is just a very powerful aggro deck that does not run out of gas and can play sort of control mid-rangey options at the top end if it needs to. We have Earthright. This deck has always been powerful ever since it got Faust and Caradwin in set 9. This is like 3 sets now that it's just been, or 4 sets now that it's just been a really strong deck. Even with the hit to Gingerbread House. I think the hit to Gingerbread House hurt it last format, but I think gaining extra healing off of Artistic Arcanist this set is really going to put it back in a position where it is difficult to kill. It's going to gain too much life for a lot of decks to deal with. And it puts out a lot of burn and storm pressure that other decks just aren't always going to be able to handle. Wasteland Abyss, I think, is a deck that, similar to D-Shift, will struggle with some of the early like aggro matchups, but it has access to a lot of good removal spells, and I think it has access to basically just the strongest control top end of any deck in this format. I think the combination of cards like Kawi and Zelganea and Yuzuki, along with the healing that the Magitrain provides you, and that those other cards provide you, and just the constant beatdown from the Magitrain, meaning that you always have a pseudo-storm body, just turns this into the best control deck that there is. And of course, Kagero, the Vanguard deck. This deck was 30% of the format in Phoenix. It was over 30% of the top 32. So not only was it immensely represented, more than double the next highest deck, it increased its representation conversion into top cut. So deck is, you know, people maybe laughed that I called the last format a tier 0 format for Kagero. But I think when it was on like 80% of BSF topping teams or whatever garbage that was, and then like over 30% and still positively converted at Grand Showdown, I think it's pretty clear, like pretty easy to say you should have been playing Kagero last format, or something that you were very confident could beat Kagero. It was the format-defining deck. It's not that anymore. It is no longer the format-defining deck. The buffs to D-Shift, the buffs to Earthright, and these new archetypes coming in compete with it very well. I even think it has losing matchups into some of them. But it is still just a raw numbers powerful enough deck that I think it deserves to stay in tier 1 here. And I expect to continue seeing it do well. For sure. Like, the early turns that it can generate just can overwhelm a lot of decks, and the burst storm damage from turn 7 onwards are just really hard to deal with for a lot of decks. So, still super strong. I think the Dragon version falls off a little bit, and I think all of the other Vanguard decks, while mostly still viable, are going to struggle to deal with sort of the power creep we get in this set. And I say that there is power creep this set, and I think that's true, but I don't think that's always bad for a game like this, so I don't want that to be misconstrued. In a non-rotating game, we obviously have to keep printing things at a slightly higher power level the more we move on, in order to keep things fresh. If you don't power creep, then you just have things like, you know, we see D-Shift and Earthright still at the top levels multiple sets after their release. If you don't push the power level up, then you get that to like an even worse degree. So I think, honestly, all things said, this might be one of the best formats the game has had in a while, and maybe for a while moving forward. I don't know how this is going to compare to some of the future formats, but I actually think this is a pretty balanced format between a handful of top decks, and as long as you're okay with playing Sword, Rune, or Abyss, or Vanguard, you have some pretty good options and a wide variety of things that will do well. And that being said, like, if you're a Forest, Dragon, or Haven player, like, you're not out of the game. It's going to be a little harder for you, but those decks are still viable as well. And I think you can realistically take... Everyone should be able to find a deck that they like that they can play at a big event this season. So, yeah. Thank you for watching. I think I'm excited to see if my sort of predictions turn out true over the next couple events. We are hitting the accelerated release schedule now, so these formats aren't going to last super long, but hopefully this was at least a bit informative and can guide some people into what decks they should be playing, or at the very least what decks they should be looking out for. So yeah, thank you for watching, and of course we'll see y'all with some deck profiles next time.